Good morning, everybody. Today I want to address how does one become a narcissist? One of those million-dollar questions, right? I've talked about it before on some other videos, but I want to go back over this because I think it's really important. It speaks to how we understand the people around us and whatever narcissists or toxic people might be in our lives, in whatever capacity. Whether you grew up with one, they're your parent, their siblings, their childhood friends, or their romantic partners. Which, as I always say, that's where you get the biggest burst of venom in your face, is when you're in the romantic relationship. But this bleeds out into all other different places. So how does one become a narcissist? Well, there are people who think that they're just basically born that way. They have mental impairments. It's genetic. You can be born into the world one precious little baby narcissist, and your fate's sealed. That's what you're going to be. There are other people who think that you become that along the way, somehow, some way, and it's a little mysterious. Well, I'm in the latter camp. I don't believe for one second someone is just born a narcissist right out of the womb, precious baby narc. So I'm going to talk about how I think this happens. Many folks will talk about the fact that the narcissist who grows up to be that was either invalidated as a child, received no attention, affection, validation, attention, and needed that attention, or they were the polar opposite and they were over-validated and what they would call the golden child who got all the attention and all the accolades and spoiled, and life was handed to them on a silver platter, and so they came to expect everything out of the world, and enough was never enough. So, on the one hand, you have people who didn't have what they needed to have, and so they're on this constant quest for validation and to have their hole filled, and their pit in their chest or their stomach, where they just keep funneling things. Or on the other side, they got everything, and therefore nothing was ever good enough. So, whichever way you go about it, it's two totally different paths, but it's basically both people are insatiable. And they're on a constant quest because nothing measures up and nothing will ever fill the void within them. And that's straight from Narcissus, who was on a search for the perfect individual who would fill him completely and end up finding himself. So that's the question. But I think actually it's the people who become narcissists can certainly be both, and it certainly has an effect, but it's also many shades of gray in between. I don't think you had to be the golden child, or you had to be totally, completely invalidated. I think there's lots of shades in between, and lots of different things that go into it. But what I'm going to tell you is chiefly what determines if someone's going to be a toxic, nasty, evil person, i.e., a narcissist. So, terrible upbringing has part of it. People will often say they'll abandon themselves as children. That in order to cope with whatever situation they had, probably lack of validation or over-validation, they create this false sense of the self, of who they really are. They do it as a protection mechanism. They do it to soothe themselves, to create a false self so that that person is basically impenetrable to the real events that have transpired in their lives. So they give themselves over to this false identity, i.e. the mask. I do think that's 100% true. That does happen for these narcissists and anybody who goes this toxic path. I've even heard someone say recently, and this is all from, guys, a psychological perspective. I heard someone say recently a pretty amazing thing. He talked about how the narcissist has what's called a bad object within them. And the bad object is this, I think he called it a cruel and condescending voice. A cruel and condescending voice within them that basically beats them down, tells them they're not good enough, makes them search for validation, does all of these wicked things within the narcissist. It's like, they have voices in their head, kind of a thing. That was really interesting. And as soon as I heard him start to talk about this, all sorts of alarm bells were going off. Think about this again. The narcissist has a bad object, this cruel voice within them that drives them to keep up the mask, look for validation, is condescending, is cruel, that they fight all their lives. What does that sound like? Can anybody say demon? A bad object? It's a demon. He didn't make that connection because he wasn't looking at it through a spiritual lens. But if you notice, most of the people who do clinical psychology, or they counsel, or they're therapists, or whatever, however they're looking at this, they're touching on all of these ideas that are very spiritual in nature, but they're not going to go there with it. And that was the best example to date that I've heard, is this. Well, but even when people talk about the mask, how they masquerade and develop this false persona, well, that's exactly how evil was described in Scripture. Satan has this mask. He masquerades as an angel of light, as something he's not. It's a projection of something else. Well, see, they're touching upon these things that are spiritual in nature, but they're not identifying it as such. They're cloaking it basically completely in the garbs of clinical psychology. And there's truth to those things, but it's not the whole truth. So here is really what happens here. As the deepest possible level, which is the spiritual level. The narcissist has a choice like each of us. They go through their lives regardless of their upbringing, their background, their situation, because you can have two kids in the same household, one becomes a narcissist, the other does not. It happens all the time. And it might not be that one was just way overvalidated and one was way neglected, and it doesn't have to be that stark of a contrast. The difference is the one who became a narcissist, little by little throughout their lives, starting from childhood and as they grew and developed, chose to practice manipulation. They chose to gaslight people and make them doubt their sense of reality. They chose to manipulate every which way that they could to get something out of the person. Maybe early on it was their parents by acting out. They get their parents' attention, or it was a sibling's attention, or as they grew up, to get the attention of the girls or the boys around them, they would act out. They would be highly flirtatious, or they would triangulate people together. Say that a girl, she's being flirtatious, she might show attraction to one guy in a male friend group and another guy in the same male friend group, and kind of just make the two pitted against each other in this triangle sort of a thing. And the narcissist I was with explained how that happened to her. I didn't know what it was at the time, but that at different occasions, men in her friend group had fought over her. Well, I realize now why that was, because she was triangulating them so badly and flirting with both of them and revving them up against each other. Well, the point is, the narcissist learns that there's a value in doing that. I get double the attention. If I do that to both of these people, I'm getting double the praise, admiration, validation, supply. The focus is on me. It's me, 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 me. So the narcissist cultivates all these little practices as they go on throughout the course of their time. Every one of those instances is a place they choose to do what we say is the evil thing. It's not like this was just happening to them. It's not like their brain was just firing off. You must go triangulate. Go manipulate this person. You need to go do this now. No. They found that those practices were successful in getting the attention and the validation and the admiration and the stuff they wanted. Maybe as they got older, that helped them get this person to ask them to the dance. Or this helped them secure the boyfriend or girlfriend. This person was going to buy a car for them. This person was going to let them in their will if they buttered up and manipulated and smear campaigned the other people around them. Do you see how this works? There's 1,000 different ways, but they catered to themselves. They developed this false self, and they used it to get adoration and stuff and accumulate, because all of life is a game to the narcissist. It's how much we can accumulate, How many relationships? How many notches on the old belt for some of them? How much money? How much stuff? How much attention? How many broken hearts? It's a game to accumulate anything and everything that they can. Because they think somehow they're going to get to the end of their life and cash in all their chips and get something back. When it's just the opposite. They're going to get nothing. They're going to have lost every good thing they've ever had. This is their pattern. This is a spiritual evil. So when I hear that they abandon themselves as children, that is true. But what they really are doing is abandoning themselves over to the powers of darkness. They're giving themselves through these habitual practices of lying, cheating, stealing, manipulation, triangulation, silent treatment, gaslighting, whatever you want to say. They are giving themselves over to the spiritual powers of darkness in the heavenly realms. Satan and his minions. Little by little and inch by inch, they do this. And guess what happens when you give yourself over to the powers of darkness long enough? You lose you lose your identity. You have no core or substance as a person anymore. You are that facade, that hologram, that mask. That's who you now are. But what that mask is basically a projection of what you have become by giving yourself over to the powers in the heavenly realms, the darkness. Now you have no core, and you're projecting something that you're not anymore, or you never were. You're projecting this false self to hide the real self, which has been given over to darkness. That's why when their mask slips, what is left? Black evil, nastiness, toxicity. Because that's the real them. Because they gave the real them over to the powers of darkness. And what you're seeing in the mask is the false them. It's the fake. It's the projection. They didn't get there overnight. They got there by a lifetime of steadily doing the practices of evil. That bad object that I talked about, he's so right about that. And that's a beautiful way to put it. It makes so much sense. But it makes even better sense when you realize that that bad object is the demonic voices that now have control over their lives. That's why no matter how much money and relationships and houses and cars and jobs and that the narcissist has, it doesn't matter because they're a disaster. They're internally a wreck at all times. You can't be under demonic control and have demonic attachment and be happy. You can't have peace. You can't be content. It's not possible. And I'm kind of going all over the place here, but this is also why, guys, they're never going to be happy in a relationship. It's not, if you think they rode off into the sunset, and we all have this temptation to think that, they rode off into the sunset and now they're happy and they got it right with this person. And they understand what it's, and they're on the right path and they want to get it right and they want to do things differently. No, they can't. They can't do it. It's not going to happen. Not capable. Because they've given themselves over. They have no true self anymore. What that self is evil. It's controlled by the powers of evil. Spiritual powers of darkness. And that bad object is the demonic attachment that they now have. And now, what they really have become is a puppet. These demonic beings slide their hand up in there, and they now are going to move that narcissist around to wreak havoc on the lives of everyone they can. They didn't come out of their mother's womb, a narcissist, a little bundle of baby narc joy. Didn't happen. They came out like everybody else did. And we all have different circumstances in life. They chose to go the path of manipulation and darkness, deceit, treachery, gaslighting, stonewalling. All of these practices they developed, those are things they chose to do again and again and again and again. Until at some point, they become taken over. They've abandoned their self, their true self, and it's gone, and it's been now overtaken, and they're that puppet. And they're a wind-up toy that Satan is going to now send into people's lives. That's their function in life. They're toasted. They're gone. And I'm talking about people who are far enough down the path. I'm not talking about people who just have some evil characteristics or some bad practices, because we've all been there. I'm talking about the people who have consciously given themselves over, and basically they're reprobates. And guys, that's not a small amount of people. That's a bunch of people. Bunch. So I want you to be, I just want to be clear about this. The narcissist is made. The narcissist is not born. They don't have some brain impairment that made them that way. They don't have a problem with their gray matter in their brain. They didn't drop out of their mother's womb a narcissist. They didn't become a narcissist when they were 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. But what they did is they steadily chose manipulation. It became all about them, all about self-serving things. And they would lie and cheat and step over anybody in the process of getting what they want. And they pit people against each other. There's no depths too deep for the darkness. Who can fathom the depths of Satan? Who can fathom the depths of the narcissist controlled by Satan? So, don't think for a second that you're going to feel pity for these people in the sense that it just happened to them. It didn't just happen to them. They squarely put themselves in the situation that they're in by their decisions and choices. And once they got to a certain place, they did have so much demonic attachment that they're given over. It's scriptural, happens throughout the Bible. And God says, you've done it. You've gone too far. There's nothing I can do for you anymore. You closed me out. You closed me out. I didn't give up on you. You blocked me out. And that took a long time. That took many blown up relationships. For many people, it took deleting children, if you know what I'm saying. It took them destroying people's lives. It took 1,000 little steps of cheating and stealing and lying, and they got there by their decisions. Narcissists are made, not born. And it is a spiritual issue. They got there by choosing the path of darkness. So I hope this makes sense to you. Drop comments below if you have anything to add. Just really something I was thinking about. I want to be clear. They're made, not born. So, all right, guys, hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to get out here for right now, but I'll come back with something later on. Until then, God bless.